the Great Indian Bustard, and Climate Action Verdict. In a recent judgment, the Supreme Court of India has recognized the existence of a fundamental right to be free from the adverse impacts of climate change. The judgment has garnered significant attention from environmentalists, mostly focusing only on its impacts on the protection of the Great Indian Bustard. The right. The states of Rajasthan and Gujarat are home to the critically endangered Great Indian Bustard. At the same time, both states also hold significant potential for the development of solar and wind power. In 2019, certain public-spirited individuals, petitioners, filed a public interest litigation seeking conservation of the bustard. In the interim, they sought an order seeking a ban on further construction of solar and wind energy infrastructure and the laying of overhead power transmission lines linked to this. They argue that these power lines were a hazard, causing the bustard to die due to the frequent collisions with the lines. In its decision, the Supreme Court imposed a blanket ban on the laying of overhead power lines in an area of 99,000 square kilometers. This included areas identified as priority and potential areas for bustard conservation. The court also passed an order for undergrounding existing power lines. Both high and low voltage, the government challenged this order, citing India's international climate commitments on transitioning to non-fossil fuels and reducing carbon emissions. It argued that the blanket ban was issued for an area much larger than the actual area in which the bustard dwells. This area, it reiterated, held a major proportion of the country's wind and solar energy potential. Further, it argued that undergrounding power lines was practically impossible. Lastly, it attributed the decline in the bustard population to other factors such as poaching, habitat destruction, and predation. In its decision on March 21, 2024, the court modified the earlier order recalling the blanket prohibition on transmission line. It left the recalibration of the order to scientific experts. To that end, it set up an expert committee to inter alia assesses the feasibility of undergrounding power lines and identifying measures for bustard conservation. This committee is required to submit its reports by July 2024, after which the court will pronounce its final judgment. In a first, the court used this opportunity to recognize the existence of a right against the adverse impacts of climate change. It noted that the right is recognized by the right to equality, Article 14, and the right to life, Article 21, enshrined under the Constitution of India. The court began by explaining the threat posed by the impacts of climate change to the enjoyment of the right to life. Thereafter, it highlighted that disproportionate vulnerability to these impacts threatens the affected person's right to equality. Concluding this discussion, the court found that the source of the right is an conjunctive reading of judicial jurisprudence on Article 21 and 14. India's climate change action and international commitments and the scientific consensus on the adverse impacts of climate change. Notably, the court recognized the existence of the right but did not articulate it any further. Additionally, it also underlined the need for articulation. However, it stood clear of undertaking that task. Arguably, the conscious choice is not articulating the right and only recognizing it departs from the court's usual practice in environmental cases. Much of Indian environmental law has developed through the court's judicial decisions in public interest cases. In several cases, it has transplanted, recognized, and articulated environmental rights and legal principles. While appreciated for being proactive, this practice has been critiqued for judicial overreach and the creation of imprecise right. Contrastingly, in this decision, the court's approach has been that of restraint. Arguably, this is an optimal approach at this early age of the recognition of the right, in that it catalyzes the discourse on climate rights, simultaneously providing time and space for articulating a more informed right. However, it must be noted that the court's recognition of the right does not appear in the operative part of the judgment. Therefore, it is not binding per se, while it will be instrumental in shaping future climate action. The extent to which it can do so remains to be seen. Just transition framework. The central issue at stake was limiting the adverse impact of renewable energy projects on the bustard, as rightly noted by conservationist Dipadito Sinha. The judgment approaches the central issue and presenting two competing choices, that is, either protecting biodiversity or allowing mitigative climate action. In other words, it projects biodiversity protection and climate action as adversarial choices. Furthermore, the recognition of the right is also contextualized in the approach which juxtaposed biodiversity protection and mitigative climate action. Accordingly, the right so recognized only relates to protecting humans' interest against climate action. Going forward, adopting an alternative approach could preclude this conundrum. This approach is utilizing the just transition framework, currently being used in climate cases around the world. It aims to make transition to a low carbon economy more equitable and inclusive. It particularly serves the interest of those most affected by such transition. This include inter alia workers, vulnerable communities, and small and medium-sized enterprises, where the core issue is similar to the one in present case. Using the just transition framework is an excellent approach in that it allows protecting underrepresented interest. The instant case. of the bustard.